Okay, good evening, everybody. We are live on YouTube. So far, we have not had any requests. Good evening, everybody. We are live on YouTube. So far, we have not had any. So far, we have not had any requests for this in-person attendance in the part of the meeting, but you are able to send any questions or comments while you're watching YouTube to Jean's address. That address, all you have to do is click on the email that I sent on the link in the email on that I sent out with Jean's name, email and address and name on it. And you will be able to send her a message via email if you have any questions. So tonight, what we're going to do is a little bit different. My major purpose for this meeting, I took a survey beforehand and debated whether to have it or not. The attendance has not been high, although a number of people have watched it on demand, streaming it off YouTube after the fact. However, one of the things that I'm concerned about is that the comprehensive plan is being worked on. We've got a survey out for it. I don't think a lot of people have been invited or have taken the survey. I think other people have been invited, but I don't know how well it's known. So my focus tonight, I'm going to be the guest speaker with assistance from our senior planner, Nikki Washington, who is, at least on my screen, she's down in the lower left-hand corner. And she will be able to field some questions that I can't perhaps. My main role is going to be to go over questions that I think are critical to the future of College Park over the next several years. I think we are kind of at the pinnacle. We're ready to roll. We've got a lot of interest in our property, and people think of 6 West and they don't see a lot going on at 6 West, but there's a lot going on Main Street and right behind Main Street. So in the next several years, we're going to have a lot of building right behind Main Street on College. I can't go into the details of it because most of it's in executive session at this point, but let me tell you, there's going to be a lot of action. We're also going to have things going on over at the Methodist Church with a whole project next to the MARTA station in that area and a major revamp at the Methodist Church. So you're not going to recognize the downtown area back a street or two from College Park. We've got 6 West going on. We've got a major development out on Herschel Road that is under the flight path that we are requiring to be heavily insulated. We've got some other possibility for development possibly under the flight path. So I'm going to talk about those kinds of issues tonight. That's going to be the major focus of the meeting. But I know everybody is interested in where we stand with our COVID situation. I know that people are concerned about code enforcement, and certainly not last, people are concerned about crime and people doing donuts in the street and what have you. So with that, I'd like to introduce Lieutenant Wilson. He's in the upper left-hand corner of my screen. Division Chief Ron Taylor, who is in the upper right-hand corner of my screen. And Officer Paniagua, who is at the bottom. And I mentioned Ms. Washington, who is in the center. And I'd like to welcome Julie Askew. I'm glad you could attend, Julie. So you got a first row seat to be able to ask questions verbally. So with that, what I'd like to do is start with the COVID status. And Ron, can you share your screen there?
Yes, I can. Let me.
By the way, this is our 57th Ward 1 meeting. We've been having 5 meetings a year for a lot of years. And I'd like to keep doing that. Ron, it's yours.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Clay. So as you all know, the COVID cases in Georgia as well as the United States continues to grow. And so I'm going to shoot you a few statistics starting from a nationwide standpoint, and then I'll narrow it down to Georgia and as locally as the city of College Park. And so if we look at the total cases within the United States, we're almost at 30 million total cases in the United States, and a total of 533,000 deaths, over 500,000 deaths in the United States from COVID. In Georgia, our total cases have gone up to over 1 million cases in Georgia, with 172 deaths. And if we narrow it down locally, if we look at College Park, we are actually down 17.9% of positive cases from last reporting, which we showed 39 cases, and to date we have 32 cases. Now, this statistic does not reflect the last 14 days of reporting, so I anticipate that number would be somewhat smaller, seeing that the trend has gone downward over the last month since the last reporting from the Fulton County Board of Health. Some things that have transpired since probably the last time we met, we are actually the home of a vaccine site over the Georgia International Convention Center. And so the CDC has opened up the age range for eligibility for the vaccine to 55 and older. And so since that age range has opened up, we've seen the number of vaccines at the Georgia National Convention Center skyrocket from 400 a day up to, I think today we did over 1,800 vaccines today. And so if anyone's interested, the convention center's hours of operations for those vaccines is Tuesday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Typically from 9:30 until 11, they reserve that time for first responders. But the trend has been, if anyone's interested, it's recommended that you get there early, and please make sure you register on the Fulton County Board of Health website to make sure that once you show up at the site, they have record of you being registered. At that site, they are offering the Moderna as well as the Pfizer vaccine. This is particularly the second round for the Pfizer. And so we're excited that we have a closer location that is more conducive to our citizens that are interested in getting vaccinated can actually do that right here in the city. And that is all the information I'm going to share. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to give me those questions if you want to.
Well, I'd like to make a comment. I sat in on a Georgia Municipal Association call this morning, which was largely devoted to the new Recovery Plan Act that was just signed off by the president recently. And we were talking about how much money was coming to the city and things of that nature. But they did mention on there that Georgia was dead last as far as getting shots into people's arms. And that's a big concern. Do you see that improving, Ron, or not?
I do see that improving, because if we think about the environment that the vaccines have evolved and developed, a lot of people are a little bit skeptical right now, but since the vaccines have been offered, we've seen those numbers increase. We anticipate as people get comfortable and get more information about the different vaccines, especially the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that's coming out, which only requires one dose, and it doesn't require the refrigeration requirements, I think people will open up and be a little bit more open to receiving those vaccines.
Well, I hope so. I published my picture on my website, getting my shot. Gene and I have both had our shots, and actually, Gene, we've had them for at least a couple of weeks, as I recall now. So they should have taken effect as good as they're going to do. Any other questions, Gene? Have you gotten anything from anyone? Any further questions? Okay, good. I'm looking good here too. So with that, well, thank you, Ron, for that. And if you can hang in a little while longer, there may be a question comes in a few minutes. Sometimes there's a delay. But with that, let's go ahead and show your screen. Well, George, Lieutenant Wilson, I guess you're next. So why don't you talk about the state of code enforcement, but you'll have to unmute.
Currently, code enforcement is they've been working hard. Us along with economic development, the fire marshals, the inspector department. We've been working to have the Target building demolished. So that's a nice piece of news. Get that eyesore off the off Old National, and get a thriving business possibly put there. We're currently working on different apartments throughout the city. This week we'll be doing a sweep of, I believe it's Woodward Estates off Reed Street. We've had complaints about that complex before, so we're definitely gonna give them a little extra attention this Friday. We've also in the past, I guess, month, we've also dealt with Hawthorne Manor and Air Court, which we're currently trying to get them to fix their issues in a timely manner. But right now, code enforcement is just moving forward, working hard.
Let me ask a question about Woodward Estates.
Yes, sir.
We had, several years ago, we had some significant issues, and I believe they did some renovation there over the last year or two. I don't know how significant it was. Do you have any insight into how significant it was?
Well, it's not significant at all from what I've observed. They had a tree that had fallen and had been sitting on the building and on the side for months before they would do anything about it. So I don't think they've done a whole lot to that complex.
Okay. Any questions for Woodward Estates? Anybody? Gene, nothing? All right. Or I should say Woodward Estates. I should say George Wilson, but if Woodward Estates is listening in,
let them
have a comment or a question. Okay, let's Officer P.
Hey, good evening, everybody.
I will share my screen and bring up your slide.
Okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, just fine.
I know my name is Estela Paniagua. That's the wife. I'm using her laptop right now. Okay, so I will talk about crime. For the city, is not on the sheet, but for the city, crime is up 19% for the whole city. That's Ward 1, 2, 3, and 4. Crime is up 19%. I talked about it at the HCPNA meeting that because we have doubled the arrest for drug violation, that's why our numbers look inflated the way they look right now, but the crime is high at 90%. I think we, from 80 some arrests for drug violation that we had last year to date, this year we got like 174. But for Ward 1 on my top left chart, Our crime is up 3.3% compared to last year, year to date. If you look at embezzlement, this year we got 12 so far. Last year we had 8. Most of those crimes are cars that do not get returned to the rental car, to the enterprise rental car, and hence they got to file a police report because the owner does not return them, but the renter does not return them, and that's how we get tagged with crimes that doesn't pertain to public safety. If you can see a theft from vehicle, which is one of our biggest hitter, year to date last year, we had 28 last year. This year we have 9. So we're doing a lot better on property crimes. And we have assault, assault is up by 137%. But again, that's pertaining to COVID and all that stuff, and domestic violence being up. So usually you have a lot of batteries and assault, because you have a lot of people in the house together, and you have domestic violence. But as far as crime, just make sure we keep our cars locked. I preach that at every meeting. Cars locked. That's our main property crime, is cars getting broken into or burglaries. But keep our cars locked. Don't leave nothing of value inside the car, and that's about it. And if you see something, say something. Give us a call. That way we can try to make contact with the suspicious person. But that's about all I got.
Officer Pete, I've got a question with regard to the embezzlement.
Yes.
With the rental cars, are these cars actually being stolen, or are they just late returning them? You think?
Late returning. But if you don't return the cars on time, the rental car business, they got to send you a letter. And if they send the letter and you don't respond, then they are able to file a police report, and you fall under theft by deception, which is embezzlement.
Theft by conversion.
Theft by conversion, sorry.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, but we had quite a few last month. We had quite a few.
But I assume that people eventually return the car, right?
Sometimes they don't. Sometimes you happen to catch it, because what happens is that people will rent it and then sub-rent it to somebody else, and that third person never returns it.
Right.
And
That's
I
true.
believe that's illegal for them to do that.
Yes, it's illegal.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Any questions from the audience, Jean?
No.
Okay, no questions. We'll move right along then.
All right.
To unshare this, and I'm going to move on to my next slide, which is what I'm concerned about for the strategic plan, or the comprehensive plan, I should say. And well, let me first show let me show this. Okay, I put this slide together and I posted it on my notices page. And the one thing that I think is a little misleading about getting in to do the survey, when you click on this particular poster on my webpage, it'll take you to the actual webpage that has this image. And if you look at that webpage, you'll see right in here, it says welcome, then recent plans and resources, contact us, and survey. What you'll see is a box down at the bottom that says continue, and that steps you across those things. That box does not take you directly to the survey. So if you want to go to the survey, you can click on this tab up here. If you want to look at recent plans and resources, you can click on this tab here. And I found that with a little bit of confusing, and in some cases, the site would just spin its wheels forever. And you needed to go back up to those tabs and click on one of them and back up and start over again. I don't know why that is, Nikki, but you might want to mention that to them. It may be a peculiarity of my browser, but at least that's one of the things that I wanted to show as just an introduction for anybody that's watching this. And what we found is that a lot of people will watch a replay, so to speak, on YouTube. They'll do a demand stream of the program. So for them, that's good advice. Let me now go to another slide that I have on strategic plan. And those are the specific issues that at least I'm concerned about. Other people may have other concerns, but this is what I think we ought to be worrying about. So can everybody see that slide?
Yes.
Okay, good. So these are the issues I said at the beginning of the meeting that I think we're at a crossroads on some of these things. And if you listen to council meeting the other night, for example, we had a lengthy discussion about chickens. That's just a tiny piece of a much larger decision about what is the character of the residential area of College Park. But let me just start with my list here. More new homes under the flight paths. Over the years, I've worked closely with the airport, the FAA. We moved flight paths around. We had a town hall the other night with regard to what's going on with the flight paths, what's going on with the National Neighborhood Environmental Survey, and so forth. And our campaign all along has been to get the flight paths in the right place to minimize the noise on our residents, and then to try to get the airport to use the airport improvement program to pay for insulation for places under the flight paths that had not been insulated before. So we've had a lot of work go on insulation along Camp Creek, for example. But people that are in Ward 4 and Ward 1 that back in the 80s had insulation done at the expense of the airport and the airport improvement program, which was Atlanta and the FAA, a joint share in that. That insulation is old. It's less effective now. The seals around the storm doors and storm windows after 30 years are somewhat worn out. And the current FAA policy is that they will not re-insulate. Now, as part of the Neighborhood Environmental Survey, one of my comments is going to be that we should do a re-insulation program for residents that are in high noise areas. But while we're saying all these things, we've got this land that is in a few places that is directly under the flight paths that is not deed restricted. It's not deed restricted by the FAA, and we bought it back, or we just have continued to have it, and it was never actually bought out by the airport. So we're in the position of, in a way, talking out of both sides of our mouth. We're saying, well, we want to reduce the noise, and we want you to insulate, but at the same time, we want to expand the home ownership in our city. We have a real need right now for more affordable homes. We're seeing the price of homes go up dramatically. And what do we do about that? I'm starting to swing on my opinion that we have the noise that we have, and these flight paths coming out of Hartsfield are not going to move much for a variety of reasons that we don't have time to go into tonight. So my inclination is to say that maybe we should be looking harder at insulation. Now, the problem with that is that that doesn't insulate your backyard. So you have to be willing to buy into the fact that depending on which way the wind's blowing, you may have more or less noise over your area, because planes will either take off to the east or take off to the west. They're still going to fly in close to College Park. They're still going to fly in exactly the same places, but they'll either be higher or lower depending on whether they're taking off or whether they're landing. And I've got all that information on the aircraft noise page of my website, so I'm not going to go over it now. So one of the important decisions we have to make, Nikki, and people should be responding to on the survey, is do we want to allow that kind of building? Even if we have the ability to do that, if the FAA has not required that land be deed restricted, should we go ahead and do that? And what does that say about young families that move in with young children? And that's going to create, and are we creating a situation where we have someone cast aspersion and say, oh, well, that's the noisy housing under the flight paths? I think that's changing. I think we're moving to a more metropolitan feel here. People are more used to traffic noise. Not that we don't want procedures flowing out of the airport that are noise abatement, but I think that there is a place for well-insulated housing under the flight paths, and we just have to manage it accordingly. And maybe it won't be young families. Maybe it'll be more seniors or people that are, if they get out of the house, they can go somewhere else. They can go on a trip or go to visit a park or what have you. But that's an issue that I would like to see people comment on in the strategic plan. Another area is downtown parking garage. There is some possibility that we will have in one of the developments that are being planned some parking downtown. But I'm not sure how much parking that's going to make available for the restaurants that we have there. And I would like to see a parking plan done, and I think there's talk of doing one for downtown. I think we're going to need, and Mr. Dorn on Main Street has been banging the drum and warning people that we need to do more about parking. And my comment has been, well, we've got the parking over at the city parking lot. But what's happening on weekends, we're starting to see that parking pretty much fill up. So there is a real concern of parking in the downtown area. And one of the things I feel is that we need to make a decision on that before we've sold all the land in that vicinity. And the next thing you hear is, well, yeah, there's downtown parking in the parking garage, but it's 4 blocks from Main Street. And that could happen. And that can happen in the next couple or 3 years, in my opinion, from what I've seen in the way of developer interest in our downtown area. Another item that I'd like to see people comment on is the protection of our tree canopy. We've had a lot of trees come down. We're reaching the lifespan of some of the trees. Disease has taken over some others. And we just had some damage from a neighbor's tree that hit a tree that hit a tree and damaged our shed. Fortunately, it wasn't our house. But we ourselves took down a pine tree in our front yard recently. I hated to do it. It was leaning a little bit toward the house. It had bark beetles. So eventually it was going to die, probably not anywhere in the near future. We don't have an ordinance here that requires a replacement of trees. We have an ordinance that requires you to get a permit. It's free. And the reason for the permit is to require that if you have a firm come in and take down a tree, they don't leave the pieces of tree there for the city to haul away. I mean, we're talking huge pieces that maybe weigh 1,000 pounds and so. So that's another thing I'd like people to comment on. How do you feel about the tree canopy? I personally think it's valuable. I think that there may be some requirement when a tree is taken down that there be other trees replanted. Now, maybe there are species of trees that are not going to grow as tall or as big. We have a lot of trees in the tree line, for example. We've got a big oak tree in front of our house that is in the tree line. If that tree needs to be taken down, it'll be the city's responsibility, not mine, to take it down. But then that tree, shouldn't that tree be considered for replacement, or should it? That's another comment I'd like to see. B&Bs. I've been concerned about B&Bs for a long time. We have, by our estimate, maybe 20, 30, 40 B&Bs that are potentially active in the city. They're very hard to actually shut down, and we have shut down a number, and we will shut them down, and people will be cited if we have adequate proof. And Lieutenant Wilson can certainly attest to that fact. But the other side of the coin is when you have an illegal B&B, it's not regulated by the city. The city's not getting any income from it. But maybe more importantly, because it's not regulated, it could be a fire trap. And there are all sorts of other requirements. Does it have a smoke alarm? Is there a separate exit, more than one exit to the facility, et cetera, et cetera? If it's not regulated by the city, then people may be putting their lives in their hands and actually staying there. The other side of the coin is that people who bought the house next door, or maybe have lived there for 30 years, weren't expecting to have a B&B next door, having parties every weekend, having a lot of traffic going in and out, and sometimes doing some inappropriate things in the house next door. I personally don't think people should have to put up with that. If you're in an area that you bought into and it allows B&Bs, that's fine. And there are some sparse areas in the city where you can actually have a B&B. But in general, that is not the case. Would you agree with that, Nikki? I think there are a couple of minor places that you can have B&Bs. Is that true?
So we would only allow B&Bs in commercial districts, and they would have to be considered boutique hotels. So it wouldn't be quite the same as what an Airbnb is. We have some additional regulations on them.
Yeah. Okay, so
it would be more of a small bed and breakfast that you would see in a commercial district that we would allow, not anything in any residential area.
Julie, did you have a question? No? Okay. Okay, so that's where I am on B&Bs. Personally, I'm not in favor of B&Bs. I think they take money away from our hotels. We have over 35 hotels in the city. I think it's especially unfair if they don't have to pay any tax or what have you, because that gives them an advantage as to the rates that they can charge. And I think it's unfair to the hotels that have spent a lot of money into the hotel industry. The next thing is resident ownership. I've been trying to get some demographics on the percent of resident ownership in the city. We have a lot of rental. We have a lot of multifamily rental in the city. And that bothers me because you have people living here who don't have a lot of skin in the game. They don't have ownership really in the city. We have very high turnover in our multifamily rental in the large portion of it. And we have a hard time with code enforcement in that rental. Fortunately, we have some people living in the city that have several properties and they rent them out, but they actually live in the city. So there's no problem finding them if there's a problem with their property. And whether it be noise or whether it be pollution or whether it just be that the property is not being kept up properly. But what I found is we have a number of absent owners. They may be in Florida, for example, and they may have several rentals here and they aren't around to contact, and we have a problem with them. So what I worry about when it comes to election time, when you're trying to figure out who you want elected on the council, or when it comes to membership on boards and so forth, how big is your pool to pick from? And if everybody is renting, there aren't many rental people that are going to run for council or be on a board. And we do have a couple people who have been on boards or are on boards that live in rental, but that's generally not the case. So that's an issue that I think is necessary to address, but maybe people don't care. Maybe that's okay. So that's another issue that I'd like to address is, should we do things to encourage resident ownership? And along with that, you have the issue of the people who have been here a long time. They may be retired, they're on a fixed income, and as the property values go up, we end up with maybe a property being bought for $80,000 and put on the market 3 to 6 months later for $200,000. And what that does is it raises the property values and it raises the taxes. And that can force some people out of their home. So that's another issue that I think we need to address. And it's sort of in an indirect case of encouraging resident ownership, but I think it's one that we need to consider. The next issue is planning for regulating traffic in general and 6 West traffic in particular. I know I've already heard from people on Fairway that they have concerns. Even people on Herschel Road had concerns about traffic coming out of 6 West and going up to Washington, and say on Fairway, going up to Washington on Fairway and then making a left turn and going out to Camp Creek or wherever, because they didn't want to go out to Camp Creek from the southern end of the commercial district there. I'm concerned about people who are going to come through the Parkview area, come over to Rugby on one of those through streets there. They already have some degree of speeding. We've had requests for speed humps there. And how do we handle that? My thinking is that you're going to have to put in speed cushions. You're going to have some rotaries maybe in that area. But this is an area for the comprehensive plan. And we're working, I believe, for 6 West on a transportation plan. But people need to hear that, people. So if you're going to comment on the strategic plan, you need to comment on how you want 6 West to fit in with the rest of the community. And I think we've done a good job so far of designing things so there's a gradual transition from Main Street over to the more modern, more commercial, more what should I say, nationwide stores or brands of that, whereas we're looking for more mom and pop or local shops in closer to Main Street. But these are areas that you can comment on in that area. Farm animals in residential areas. If you watch the council meeting, we had a long discussion on that. I personally don't care if somebody had a pet chicken or two and had some eggs. And if that chicken was a true pet and lived in the house, I don't know. I don't know whether you can have a pet chicken in a house at this point, Nikki. I suppose you could if it were called a pet, and it was. But if you're going to have a coop in the backyard, my concern is that you'll have noise and odors from the coop. And do you want that 5 feet from the property line? Well, what we did last night, I think, largely eliminates the problem, because we restored or kept the original part of the ordinance that said that chicken coops have to be 75 feet from any domicile, any place people are actually living in. And that reduces, certainly on the small lots, the R3 lots, that reduces the number of lots that you could possibly work out. Now, we had a chicken coop block and a half from me. I actually worked with the owner to find a location at that time that was 75 feet away from everything. And it was viable. We did have a chicken loose problem with it that code enforcement, I think, has right now with other places that have chickens. But that's taken care of in the new ordinance. They're going to be fenced well, and that'll be a requirement. But what do you want as the character of the city? You know, do you want it to look like an urban area, or do you want it to look more like a suburban area? Do you want it to be more consistent in architectural style, or do you want it to be kind of a hodgepodge of things? And when I say architectural style, I don't mean to restrict the style of the house in itself, but do you want a lean-to in the front yard and so forth, things of that nature, which we have code enforcement and code restrictions against. But there's a tendency for people to want to have more freedom with what they do with their property. And I think we need to cross that bridge. Are we going to be more consistent, or are we going to allow more deviation from standards in the property area? And part of that is animals, and part of that is another area is subdivision of larger properties. We have some large properties on Rugby and on Lyle and in Ward 4. And could those properties be subdivided? Would we want those properties to be subdivided in order to create higher property density? I personally am not a fan of that, but that's an area that I think is something to comment on in the strat plan, in the comprehensive plan. I keep calling the strat plan, but comprehensive plan. And the last thing I had on the agenda was K through 12 education quality. We don't run the school system here, but unless we get more young families in the area, and when we get more families in the area, they're going to demand high quality education. We have struggled with local education. Woodward is first-class institution, but there are a whole lot of people that can't afford Woodward. And we champion the Main Street Academy. I championed the Main Street Academy from many years ago when we first started it. And it's been successful. Do we need another Main Street Academy? From what I understand, has been pretty crowded over the years. That's an issue. Do we want to somehow try to take on our own educational school district? I don't know whether that's possible or not. That's possibly a question that Nikki can answer. But that's an area that education quality is important, and we need to get more parents involved with the school system. So we need more ownership, home ownership, people that are going to be here for a while, and we need more single family residential with young people in it, in my opinion. Nikki, you want to comment on the school district thing at all?
Sure, yeah. So the school district thing is getting a little bit away from the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is really a larger vision and is a policy, right? It's very policy driven. It's something that we want to be able to refer back to time after time when we're looking at these different developments that are coming in, or we're looking at different projects that might be happening, or we're looking at subdivision of land. We want to refer back to the comprehensive plan and say, did we say we want this? As far as incorporating education quality, I think that that can be in community goals as far as how can we promote education quality. And how we do that is, we talk about, do we want to have a, unfortunately, this is mostly how you, from what I've seen, mostly how you do education quality is, do we want to have a tax allocation for our education system? We can do that apparently for College Park schools specifically, but it's an undertaking, of course. So we have to look at it and see if that's something the city is really interested in. And if the citizens are interested, if that's a priority for everyone, we'll look into it further and see what we can do to get it, to work it into that long-term plan. Also, as far as maybe getting a little bit away from education, but recreation facilities kind of go hand in hand with this, right? So where do we want those things? Where do we think they're appropriate? Do we want to have access to the schools? How do we create, pathways for kids to safely walk to school? That sort of thing is kind of more of what we would think about in the comprehensive plan, is how do we promote those places almost, from more of a like physical standpoint. How do we highlight them? How do we get people, to attend? Do we want to focus on, our recreation areas as far as, we're doing the splash pad. Is everyone, is that something we want to see more of? Do we want to see more promotion of recreation facilities like that? Should we be looking at doing something like that closer to the school? That sort of thing. So hopefully that makes sense.
Well, I was an ex-school board member many years ago, so I certainly am in favor of good education. I fortunately had a very good education, and we need to do something. I know our mayor ran on, one of the things that she ran on when she was running for mayor was to improve the educational system. I certainly, when I was running, I put that down as one of the things that I wanted to see improve. But I didn't see a clear way for the city to do it. And so to the extent that we can foster it through the recreational system, I think that's a good thing. I also think if we get enough, you and I had this discussion actually earlier. I think you said, yeah, if you have more young families there and you get more people interested in the school, that they will drive it. And I certainly would agree with that, because I know at one point a couple of residents from our ward went in and actually headed up the PTA at College Park Elementary, but you couldn't get the parents to come to the PTA meetings. It was very, very, very sparse. So if you can get parents that are interested and will participate, that's a good thing. I see a lot of information. I see a lot of information around people in the community being willing to help with the schools. And I think you're going to see more of that. I think that's being encouraged. So I just hope that with the young families we see coming in, when their children become 6 years old or 5 years old, they're not going to be wanting to move away because of inadequate education. So somehow I'd like to at least give some mention to it in the comprehensive plan, that it needs, as you put it, to be encouraged, needs to be supported, et cetera, et cetera. But and there are ways of doing that through the recreation program, as you said, and through it making it feasible for kids to go to a local school, close in. So good. Okay. I didn't have anything else that I wanted to cover. This would normally be the point where if we had a physical meeting, we'd be asking if anybody had any questions. We only have one in-person attendee, and that's Ms. Askew. And Julie, do you have any questions that you wanted to ask or points you wanted to make?
No, I thank you very much, though. This has been very helpful and informative.
Well, thank you. I hope the people that have tuned in on YouTube or that will do streaming on YouTube will also find it that way. Nikki, is there anything else that you can think of that I missed that ought to be considered for the strat plan?
I think we covered it pretty well, but really, I just want to emphasize, the importance of the comprehensive plan. This is an opportunity for citizens to hold their elected officials accountable. Councilman Clay, this is your time to express, what do you really want them to do? What do you want to see? And that this policy will drive future decisions. And it gives you a leg to stand on when they do something, that maybe you don't agree with. You can look at the comprehensive plan and say, did we say we were going to do this? And when you look at it, and if it says no, we didn't say we were going to do this, you can bring it up and say, hey, this wasn't part of the plan. We gave our input, we said what we wanted, and this wasn't it. Or maybe they're not going to do something that you think they should do, and you look at the comprehensive plan and say, hey, you said you were going to do this. This is the money. This is where we should do it. So it is important, and we really want to get everybody's input. So if you're watching this, fill out the survey. Our community meeting is going to be April 30th. It'll be via Zoom. We're also thinking about maybe in May or June doing an outside event where we can get some input. We're looking into that. So just keep your ears perked and let us know what you want to see in it. What you see for your vision of the city is the tagline. What's your vision for the future of College Park? And that's it. And also feel free to email me. You can always just send me your opinion, and I'll put it in the file, and we'll collect all of those. Even if you've already filled out the survey, you think of something, let me know.
Okay. Well, Nikki, I'd like to thank you for participating, and Lieutenant Wilson, and Division Chief Taylor, and Officer Panagua, and Julie, for you attending as well. I appreciate that. And I hope we can do this again. We'll see how many views we get on YouTube, see if it makes sense to hold these. The next one would be 2 months from now. So this is March, April, May. It'll be in May. We normally skip June and July and then pick up in August. And maybe by August, we'll be able to meet in person again. If our president is accurate in his prediction for 4th of July, well, if we can have barbecue on 4th of July, maybe we can have a Ward 1 meeting in August. So thanks everybody for attending. Appreciate your time, and look forward to hopefully having another meeting in a couple months. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night.